Good evening, everybody, and hello. Welcome from New Orleans. Welcome from California. Welcome from Mystery Island, Maryland. I'm John OLoughlin, and welcome to another Thursday Trio edition of McDuff Lives, featuring in the center box Professor Darrell Hamamoto, and on my right and your left, none other than the investigative journalist George Webb.
Hey, Doctor. Hey, John. How you doing?
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening and you're down on Bourbon Street, am I right, George?
We're a couple of blocks away. We're at the actual cigar bar where that shows.
Was that Rom?
Yeah, that's Rom. Yeah, he's got in his engine. He's a drug dealer for Rom. But we're actually on the cigar bar that Guy Bannister recruited Cuban exiles to go fight in the war. So we're at that. We're doing the whole Kennedy thing. We're playing the role of McDuff, who's trying to get to the bottom of Bay of Pigs and smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces.
Well, that's great, man, and I'm so jealous of your ability to get out in front of everybody else. I mean, you're far ahead of all these researchers now. I know Professor Hamamoto had some thoughts about JFK that he wanted to bring up tonight. So let's turn it over to Darrell for see what he has on that.
Thank you. But before we go to this, I wanted to return briefly to the past. I know George mentioned having visited Experience Hendrix up in Seattle, the museum dedicated to Jimi Hendrix, James Marshall Hendrix, who was of Cherokee background, by the way. He's one of the great Native American rock musicians, such as, Robbie Robertson and Jesse Ed Davis and so on. But anyway, I was just listening, getting into the mood for today's Thursday Trio. Earl King, he comes out of New Orleans, and he's the guy that did Come On, right? That's Jimi Hendrix. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. Now, George, I think you're gonna like this. You might be familiar with this book already. It's by Servando Gonzalez. Oh, you're familiar?
Yeah. Is that one of the guys that was in the shooter team?
No. He's a researcher. He's a younger guy. Well, he's middle-aged, but it's called Partners in Crime: The Rockefellers, CFR, CIA, and the Castro Connection to the Kennedy Assassination. And I will scan the real meat of it for you here, for you and John. But there's a whole section here that asks the question. It poses this question that a lot of researchers are not asking, except for Mr. Gonzalez here. And he says, did Castro kill President Kennedy? And remember last time I mentioned that Cuban intelligence was quite sophisticated, and the CIA had a lot of respect for them, perhaps because they worked in cahoots, because Mr. Gonzalez claims here that Fidel Castro was a CIA asset. And that explains why that island nation that's just not that far off of the coast of Florida, the U.S., has remained untouched since the Bay of Pigs. Not only that, he outlines a number of he names names, and he talks about, and a lot of it is consistent with your own research, of course. But he argues in a nutshell that Fidel Castro and his people had the means, the motive, and the I guess the money to really carry it out. At the time of the Kennedy assassination, there were 4 separate assassination squads from Cuba that were in the U.S. for some sort of project. So it all kind of intersects here. What do you think of that hypothesis at this point, or theory?
I was just talking about this. First of all, John, you need to be here. This is New Orleans. It's all John OLoughlin here with all these street musicians, and they're all incredible. But I have bought like 50 books on the Kennedy assassination, and that's how you should be. You should always be looking for that nugget. I found a nugget about this Wilcott memo that talks about Oswald being a double agent right from day one. The day they sent him, they knew that he was going to come back. That's why they bought the weapons and the trucks in his name. And I definitely think that there was something going on with Angleton and these foreign intelligence operations to make sure that there was this strategy of tension. If you remember, Angleton was born into the strategy of tension in Italy with the Red Brigade and all that stuff. And they basically just moved the strategy of tension, which is create gang, counter gang, false flag operations to get the money. And we know from John's research that the CIA got control of this Caribbean basin here. And that's when all of a sudden we have the strategy of tension in the Caribbean basin. So Angleton working with Russian intelligence, Kostakov out of Mexico City, the DGI, I believe it was, from Cuba, the whole shooter team. That's why I thought he was a part of the shooter team. Felix Rodriguez and all those guys that they trained with had some roots from the original Castro overthrow of Batista, where this is why I think Bay of Pigs failed, because Castro was a CIA asset and he was supposed to overthrow Batista, and then they were going to have someone else, the Minutemen or somebody else, overthrow Castro. But they knew about weapons caching already because they were those guys. So Bay of Pigs needed to fly and airdrop. So they airdropped the wrong ammo. All the things that went right with the Batista overthrow went wrong because you didn't have, Che Guevara up in the hills at the weapons caches. And the way you really do an invasion right is you cache as close to where you're going to be using the weapons as possible. So I think I'm going to definitely catch that book.
Okay. And in the meantime, I'll scan these few pages here. And I assume he's a reader, native speaker as well as a reader of Spanish. So he has some documents and some other sources that the most of the other Kennedy assassination researchers don't have. And what's really interesting for me is that he's right in my backyard. I should go interview him. He's in, where Hayward is, right? East Bay, Hayward, California. It's south of Oakland, let's say. And disregard the kind of strange titles of these books. I read them anyway. It doesn't really matter to me. It's Spooks Books, and he has a whole bibliography here. He is Cuban-born himself, and he calls himself bills himself an American independent scholar, historian, semantician, and intelligence analyst. And he gives his whole resume here. I'm going to be checking out his other books. I think he's probably down in San Leandro, California, which is not far from Hayward, and that's right at the northern tip of Silicon Valley too. So it's perfect. So this is the type of material that when you think you've read everything and explored all the angles, there's always something new, as you know, George. Also, for the Catholic faithful, and don't be alarmed, I'm not going to say anything against the Vatican or the Pope. On the contrary, I'm going to say something positive about the Catholic Church, because I know it comes in for a lot of abuse and invective. So I'm putting out the olive leaf here. But this ties in. Oh, that's a nice cafe. Very nice. Oh, what happened to George? No.
Cuban cigar bar. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Nice. But I just wanted to mention, as part of the list of martyrs that John has discussed on his shows, and George, you've mentioned them in your research, people like James Forrestal, right, died 1949. Frank Olson died 1953. William Colby, 1996. And I know, John, your father, Thomas OLoughlin, might have been a casualty of these intrigues here. But you add to the list one individual who's a true martyr, and that would be Father Thomas Merton.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's Roman Catholic, so it's okay. But I read you probably did too, John. It was really cool to read The 7-Story Mountain, remember that?
I don't remember it. It was God, it was maybe 30 years ago, Daryl.
Yeah. But,
But I was like, oh, well, where'd that name came from? Blast from the past. Yeah.
right.
What's the name of that order? Down in Gethsemane, Kentucky, right?
They're called the Trappists.
Oh, the Trappists. Yeah.
Right, where they, the expression "keep your trap shut" because they're, they have this silence exercise, right,
Hmm.
for meditation purposes and so on. But this is a book by an author who I found recently. First, I read his name's David Martin. He has a co-author here, but he wrote a really good book on James Forrestal. So I said, okay, let me see what he has to say about Thomas Merton because I only knew him through reading this spiritual book, guidebook. Oh yeah, there. That's the same guy, David Martin. He's
David.
good. He's good.
Yeah.
And Father Thomas Merton died supposedly of electrocution in Thailand, in Bangkok, in 1968. Supposedly he tipped over an electric fan when he was coming out of the shower, and of course he goes through all the forensic evidence to disabuse us of the scenario that was laid out. He goes through all the medical reports and the police cover up and all of it. But the back of the book becomes really, really interesting, and this is where the Kennedy assassination and George's current research intersects with the story of Father Thomas Merton, and that is he was a staunch opponent of the Vietnam War. And because of Seven Story Mountain that everybody was reading, even people irreverent, aspiring intellectual types like me, what does this priest have to say? Teach me. And, I really like the book. He had a huge worldwide following. So whatever Father Thomas Merton said is going to have a lot of weight, similar to the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., right? I mean, he doesn't have that level of stature and awareness and recognition, and maybe I'm hoping to change that to a slight degree. But nonetheless, he was on the same message of peace and hope and anti-colonial, he didn't call that the CIA, but that's really what he was doing. But he was on this mission of creating peace, as was his charge as an ordained priest, right? So this is suspicion, of course, is raised by the author David Martin and his co-author Hugh Turley, who did a lot of legwork in doing the research. They're not armchair researchers at all. They're like George Webb. They're out there pounding the pavement, talking to people, going through archives, and just sifting through material, and just on and on and on. And here, this is where it intersects with George's research. He ties the later killing, 68, of Father Thomas Merton with the Kennedy assassination, that network, whatever the specifics are, whether Fidel Castro was intimately involved or not, but he ties that all in there, and the same cast of characters show up: Angleton, Dulles, the Dulles brothers, on and on and on. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is what I took away from it. What I got from this is that he names this one person. I'm not going to name it here. I mean, it's him. He wrote it, but I'm not going to get John in trouble here. But go to chapter 18, and he talks about a covert agent of a certain name, and he mentions a couple of other people. And this is a warning to us. The people that he believes that were involved in the cover-up of the assassination, the murder of Father Merton, were independent journalists. They were working for these small indie operations that we know that are near and dear to us. And I'm not going to give you their names there. You can read the book about it. And what happened is that they started to go soft. They were turned, and now they are hanging out with the Clinton Foundation type people, right? So what I'm saying is that it's easy to identify the opposition, our polar opposites. We know who they are, but then there are also these individuals who turn. They go soft, or they're compromised in some sort of fashion. And this book here, toward the end of the book, serves a cautionary warning about some of these people who are independent journalists, who are probably our worst enemies because we don't even know that they're working at cross purposes with us. Anyway, your comments, John?
Well, let me jump in and say that we just found out Ted Shackley Jr. was in Laos. And, Ted Shackley obviously being very involved in the assassination of David Atlee Phillips and JM Wave and in Miami, and Operation Mongoose. We got two guys here that are actually staying in the house of 544 Camp Street, so they're actually, tripping over free Cuba committee canary handouts,
Mm-hmm.
but Shackley, this whole drug trade, and if you go to John's fantastic, immediately after watching this, go watch John's interview with Doug Valentine. Doug Valentine has this unprecedented access to 200 CIA agents, and Doug is not a big Colby fan, and John, was the guy who showed me where Colby lived on the island there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it's a late night or late life, he's trying to absolve his sins for Vietnam. Yeah. And he's trying to say, go stop this thing, go stop this drug trade. And, after Kennedy dies, let's say you were the McDuff and you were running here in New Orleans with Charles Lyons and you were trying to get in front of that second invasion, and Kennedy gets shot. You feel like you've failed the president, right? And the only thing you can do, the only thing that McDuff had left, or Charles M. Lyons, or whoever it was, whatever that team was, the only thing you have left is to go after their drugs. That's the only thing, that's the only absolution you have. And I really believe that that's why all this kismet happened. I mean, out of nowhere, Doug calls me, gets him in touch with John. They figure out TDY was John's dad. I mean, this is really incredible. We're on the edge of this, putting together new things and new connections and rewriting history with the truth,
Let me jump in, because right there, I think, is on the cusp of where we're at. And as I forwarded to you, George, I don't know if you've seen them yet, two of the pages that I took pictures of from the court docket of the federal criminal trial of Irvin Scarbeck back in 1961. And on each of those pages is noted the witness, Charles W. Lyons. That is the same man that Bill Taylor at Deep State Analytics just did a number on. I mean, he just did a number on the guy and associated him with this J. Pierpont Morgan that's not really a Pierpont Morgan, but he has the same name. How did that happen? And then that all connects back to there it is. So if we look at now let's put these two things together, George, and this is where I want you to help me think this through. Now let's be persuaded by Bill's reporting that Charles W. Lyons has been working for the CIA all this time. Then remember, my dad got his commendation for his job doing in the surveillance of Scarbeck. But they didn't call my dad as a witness in the trial. They called Charles W. Lyons as a witness in the trial. And they took a picture of Lyons for the paper. They didn't take a picture of my dad. I'm not jealous. I'm just saying, look at the tradecraft that's going on here. That puts Lyons in control of the trial. And one of the things that I will stick with me from what Doug Valentine said Saturday, which was our most recent interview and the best one yet, as far as I'm concerned, it was just, I'm just thrilled with it. Well, one of the things that he said was the way that you do a case, the way you make a case is, that you've got some people that are good at testifying in court and some people that are good on the street. So if the guy on the street makes the bust, but he's no good in court, or perhaps you don't want him to go to court because you want to keep him, off the radar screen, then you just put somebody else up there and they say, well, they made the bust. And that's common procedure in the DEA at the time, and probably in all the law enforcement agencies, that they would just substitute somebody. So that's what I'm thinking. Is there evidence now that my dad and Charles W. Lyons were right there? I mean, on one side and on the other side of this struggle, of this, virtual war between the CIA and the FBI at the time.
Well, yeah. So, with Charles Lyons, I'm on the fence. I collecting information like mad about him, trying to see is he an FBI guy or is he a CIA guy? I know Pierpont Morgan is a CIA guy. I know he's trying to derail, and out Oswald as a informant. We got this Wilcott memo that says this is happening, this war between the FBI and CIA over this thing. The fact that Lyons is with your dad in Poland with Golanowski, and also here in New Orleans on the same sort of White Russian pipeline from Minsk to New Orleans with the Trade Mart is really the lead I'm following. There's this de Mohrenschildt pipeline. And why does de Mohrenschildt want to go get all the old White Russians that were trying to do the Baku and doing all the surveillance in the Baku and Minsk, where his dad was, Noble Oil and doing the resources for Rockefeller over there? Why is he trying to bring them all literally a block away from us here into the Trade Mart? Because these guys know how to find oil. And the CIA now has the oil. And so it's wherever the oil goes, Charles W. Lyons and McDuff goes. So I'm not there yet with Lyons being the bad guy, but I do agree. When I heard you say that with Doug, I said, that's it. I don't think it's because your dad couldn't present to a court. I think it's because they wanted to keep him secret. They wanted to.
Yeah, they don't want to blow whatever his cover was when he did the surveillance.
Right. Doctor?
Yes, I posed this question to you, George, the other day, and maybe you can expand on it. Since oil and energy resources loom so large in this conflict and all this intrigue, is there a connection between this scenario that goes back decades and the more recent ecocide or the blowout that Schlumberger was involved with, the BP blowout, right? Which also wiped out a lot of animal populations, and human beings were relocated, communities were relocated. Was this sort of a social science experiment, sort of like Katrina, or was it really an accident?
Katrina?
No, well, either one, but I'm talking about BP in specific.
Deepwater Horizon, the
The
blowout.
Deepwater Horizon explosions. Because there's this, I forgot the person's name, but I saw this presentation. It's on a video. It's probably on YouTube somewhere. But he was an engineer or an insider with Schlumberger. He's a whistleblower, and implies or stronger says that they had foreknowledge. And John, as you know, I'm sure you would want the audience to understand that BP, the B stands for British, right? British Petroleum. They relabeled themselves just like, KFC used to be called Kentucky Fried Chicken. But yeah, just for the younger viewers, that's British Petroleum. That's about as close to the core of power as you want to get.
You bet your baby.
Fit Rothschild on the all the gas stations, so they just went with BP. So yeah, John, you do that with Harley Schlanger better than anybody in the world, and this is the dark hand behind here. And both of the things you mentioned, Katrina, where we went over to the levee that got hit, just so happens the levee gets hit with an oil tanker right as Katrina's at the high water mark. That's convenient. Right. And then the other one, of course, is the Deepwater Horizon releases billions, like 10 billion. And who's doing the PR for BP? Rahm Emanuel. And Greenberg is doing the PR.
Oh, no. That's terrible.
Well, all these connections, I think we're onto this incredible intertwining of energy and weapons. unfortunately,
Yeah.
drugs to pay for the covert operations. We're sitting in the middle of the rat line, the Ruby rat line, I call it,
Hmm.
between Florida here and Dallas. The weapons are coming through here, going to wherever DeMoran Shell cracks rocks and finds either trapped, natural gas or uranium or whatever. Just
Hmm.
recently, we tracked DeMoran Shell to Ghana, which is our neighborhood news, and he's a stamp collector supposedly. Well, DeMoran Shell never collected a stamp in his life. These are cover positions. He's in Yugoslavia cracking rocks, right, for uranium. And remember, the guy who owns a Texas School Book Depository, our favorite Bird, right, good friends in the Dallas Petroleum Company with DeMoran Shell, has Bird oil and Bird uranium. So we're on the right track, and this is a really exciting phase. But guess what, guys? I got messaged from a couple of months ago from Oliver Stone's people that had interviewed me 4 years ago. Oliver Stone is coming back here to New Orleans to film a updated JFK with all this information. He's going to be going to all the places Andy and I and the news team have been going, and he's going to play it at the Cannes Film Festival in July. So Oliver, if you're out there, you got a team on the ground here right now to get your B-roll, and we're ready to go. And the guy you should really interview and be the star is one McDuff, one John OLoughlin, because I really believe this Lions team is at the center of this whole thing. Because look, McDuff knows DeMoran Shell. Remember, Dimitri DeMoran Shell goes to Loomis. Dimitri is OSS. Who would know about the whole White Russian network down
and, and this is where I raise the question. Dimitri von Mohrenschelt has been accessible for his whole life. I think he died in the 90s, but he was not hidden. He was publishing the Russian Review and doing a lot of work on his own after World War II that I didn't really know about until I recently did more of a deep dive on him. So the question is, if Michael Golanowski was really Michael Romanoff, the one person that I would have asked to compare the photos or something would have been one of the Mohrenschelts, either Dimitri or George, or one of the other ones. They had a sister and another brother that was, there. In other words, there was plenty of people that were associated with the Russian Romanov family that could have given the definitive answer of, was Michael Golanowski really a Romanov or not? Why didn't we ever have a witness, an eyewitness to identify, yes, it is, or no, it's not? And I think that's all part of the CIA's game of smoke and mirrors to keep us guessing.
Well, there's some I'm sorry, doctor. There's some metadata here. Golanowski does meet Alan Dulles, and they shut him away from Hoover. And they use Alan Dulles to say, okay, you don't want to talk to Hoover, but you can meet Alan Dulles, right? But I say Dimitri is the front man, and the guy in the back is DeMoran Shell going around cracking all these rocks for uranium and oil. And remember, he also has a company that does photo interpretation for satellites. You remember, you can find oil from the sky by leakages from the Earth's crust, right? The reason why I think Oswald goes over there, right, to Minsk is he's the U-2 guy, right? He can do photo interpretation of the U-2. But the problem is the U-2 is only flying over hostile nations. If you're DeMoran Shell, you want satellites like a Corona satellite to give worldwide coverage so you can find oil all over the world, right? If Oswald goes and obsoletes the U-2, guess what? Congress appropriates an emergency funding to do the Corona satellite. Bissell, both are Bissell's pet projects.
Yeah, Bissell.
So it all fits together if you combine energy. Once you insert energy into the mix, it all makes sense.
Just quick comments as John was speaking. I don't know if you remember, John, this is maybe 20, 30 years ago already, but there was a lot of hubbub about about Anastasia, and she was supposed to be one of the princesses of the Romanovs that escaped the assassination, and she'd resurfaced in the U.S. someplace. So maybe the literature, the legend that was being, it sounds really fishy. The legend surrounding and I think there might have been a couple of movies, and I'm sure there were articles that were being published by Time, or one of their subsidiaries, Good Housekeeping or something like that. I think that might be able, I mean, it might yield some information about the legend that was being built in order to hide this larger operation. Secondly, in following you two gentlemen, John and George, I checked out the New York Times back in, I think in the late 50s, early 60s, around the time when George de Mohrenschildt or Dmitry de Mohrenschildt would have been active. And there are quite a number of references to the White Russian expatriate community in the society pages of the New York Times. So they weren't hiding there, but what it tells me is that they were probably hobnobbing with the establishment, the financial and political establishment, openly.
Oh yeah, they had titles like Baron or Prince or something, and that was very, very saleable to your gullible Wall Street financiers who wanted to marry their wives into royalty. I mean their children, excuse me, their daughters into royalty, and that happened a lot. George, you are in the middle of the Guy Richards book. The last time we talked, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say
about Guy Richards's book.
Yeah, right in the middle of Imperial Agent, right in the 100-page mark or so, Golanowski talks about meeting his sister. They're reunified. The whole them being out near Perm and the murder out in the basement and so forth. But there's it's very spotty evidence that the family was murdered, and he was actually reunited with his sister Anastasia in the United States. He writes about this in his book, and the bona fides, the checking that the CIA did was all au fait. I mean, it all checked out, and Dulles openly admitted that the family hadn't been all murdered, and it makes much sense, because why do you kill them all? Tsar Alexander actually lived. The deal was, we won't kill you.
Oh, losing your audio. We're losing your.
Sorry, guys. Just 1 second there.
Okay.
Sorry, you're back. Okay. The deal was, if you tell us where all Tsar Nicholas's secret bank accounts are in Germany and Poland and London, city of London, he had a lot of his money at the city of London, we won't kill the family. And that was the handshake deal. Supposedly it was brokered by Dulles, right? So he talks about this. Tsar Nicholas lives out his life in the middle of Poland, and the sisters were more kind of diaspora around. I think he had the three sisters, the princesses, and they had to live a life of complete anonymity. Otherwise, the deal was they were going to be put to death. So, but see, if you're a Rockefeller or a Rothschild, you need to go back someday to that Baku if you overthrow Russia and claim your takings. I mean, the Baku was the name of the game here, right? So in the book, he says, oh yeah, they met Anastasia. All the CIA guys went through all of her stuff, and they went through every possible blood test, and they did the dental charts. It was all that stuff, and it checked out. So you're onto something here, which is this White Russian thread. You keep pulling it, and it keeps giving and giving and giving.
Well, Hollywood was also instrumental in creating the Mandela effect of its time by rewriting history, refiguring it. Because I can think of just offhand, a huge feature film that was about the Anastasia story. It's called Nicholas and Alexandria, I believe. It was like a 3-hour epic film, sort of like Dr. Zhivago on that scale. And it was hyped in that fashion. This was, I think, in the late, maybe early 70s, I think, or 71, 72. And then there's another film, which is a musical starring the diva Barbara Streisand that has the Anastasia theme, as I recall. It's kind of hazy right now, but it's called On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, right? And we know now that the CIA was very much involved with creating the Mandela effect and planting fake memories to the American public through TV and through a film. So we're seeing that the popular culture was massaged to create a sort of a legend behind or to obscure the White Russian influence. I think. I'm just guessing here.
Disney also did an Anastasia takeoff, and every time I see Disney do something, I say, I'm so proud of my Nazi heritage. They always do a treatment. If you know Disney covers it, you know you're on the right track.
Yes. Perfect.
Well, we were talking with Doug about Rudyard Kipling and how the Jungle Book became the psychological icons, the animals that are really humans, but expressing different human characteristics, then becomes the Lion King and a lot of the themes of Disney. It's all psychological warfare against us. It's been going on a long time. Here's a question for you, George and Professor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'll enjoy this one. Has the entire Cold War been a school play?
Well,
George?
I certainly say so, because Galen had no choice. You either get hung in Nuremberg, or you divide your forces, send half to Russia, send half to the United States, and you have to keep a parity. This is the gang counter gang strategy of tension, right? And we now know Golanowski, among the 240 people he outs, the KGB agents, right? Only 18 or 19 in the US. The CIA never goes after those people. They're all the Fort Hunt. John took me down to Fort Hunt, Fort Washington. But he outs two guys, one by the name of Himmler in Russia, the other guy by the name of Mueller.
Yeah, Mueller.
So they were back channeling all the nuclear secrets. Sputnik probably was a huge school play. We went out to Greenbelt. NASA was the response to Sputnik, right? And on and on and on. You want to talk about the nuclear submarines? How did they get all this technology within, minutes of it being, the Polaris comes out and all of a sudden the Russians have a nuclear sub, a year later. Turing, not Turing, I'm forgetting the guy who did the H-bomb, but, he comes out with the H-bomb. 2 years later, Russia has the H-bomb. Right after the A-bomb was the same way. So I think the whole thing was a school play. Mark Kulak has been really the first guy on this, to the point where he said there were never really rockets that could reach, knock out the U-2. The U-2 was a school play. It was actually landed by Gary Powers in order to get Congress to spend the money on the Corona satellite. If you really go through the big inflection points, the case can be made for school play all along.
Well, I will answer that by saying it's school play plus. And I will use the analogy that George made a couple of days ago about the traditional New York, New Jersey 5 families, right? You got the 5 families, they're all in the same endeavor, let's call it crime, but one family is pushing ahead of the other. So they're in a constant situation of tension and sometimes outright internecine street warfare, right? So it's a school play, but with the 5 criminal gangster families that George alluded to earlier. The unfortunate part is that, well, back in the old days, the old school gangsters, they had a saying: "We only kill each other." Right? We keep it within so everybody's cool. You can go to church and the kids and mother can be sheltered from all the sordid realities of the streets. The big difference with the contemporary time is that everybody dies, right? Because an element of psychopathy, not an element, a huge chunk of psychopathy has replaced the old school players, actors with the new ones, the technocrats in the white coats.
I may need to switch to a different. My camera's running on a battery, so I may switch here, guys. So
Okay.
duck out here a second.
All right.
All right.
Well, Professor, it's you and me, buddy.
Okay.
But I think you're exactly right, and I think that's what we're kind of seeing played out in our politics now. Because once the legitimate government is gone, and my date for that is the Kennedy assassination, November 22nd, 1963. From that point on, it's been them. It's been the people that assassinated Kennedy or have been running the country under the false, appearance of still continuing the republic and its institutions. But what's really been going on is that these 5 families, as you put it, or the different gangs, have been maneuvering to get more and more pieces of the pie, just like medieval kingdoms going to war against each other and not caring a damn about the peasants that get killed, just because there has to be, you got to be drafted into the local lord's army. That's your duty. You have to go and fight. And, so I lost 20,000 peasants, the other day. So what? I got 200,000 more coming along, and they don't worry about it, because that is that nobility, that idea of we are the nobles. We don't have to worry about the common people. The common people, God takes care of them. We don't worry about them. If they die, they die. So what? And we just worry about preserving our honor, and preserving our family and our titles, and trying to get our kids into, the knighthood, or get them somehow elevate them higher than they are at the moment. That's your goal in life, is to, just keep building that family nobility, and completely cutting the rest of us out. Just that nobody else counts. And that's what we're seeing as our country departs from its roots as a republic, and goes
I'm in.
and
Welcome back.
just saying, George, we've been departing from our roots as a republic, and now are launching into what really can only be called an empire, an imperial. What I think Harley's right when he calls it a banker's dictatorship. And so we've been transforming, and the people with the money know that, and so they've been maneuvering. And maybe that's why we have troops on the Capitol Hill right now. It's because one gang has got control of the Capitol, and they don't want the other gang, to get it.
Mm.
So I agree with you.
Well, in the old days, they would just be very honest about it and call us peasants or serfs or chattel, right? But we're in the age of bureaucracy, so they come up with a euphemism. We're just George. They call us collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
We're in the way, and so in a way, that's good, because you know what, we think we're being targeted by all these strategies, whatever it might be: bacteriological warfare, ecocide, pharmacide, nuclear weapons threats, and the rest of it. But they have the most to fear from the other families, because they're all trying to whack each other, right? So that takes a lot of pressure off us. We can let them deplete their own resources by going through it, but we have to figure out a way to survive this gang war, this gangland war, on a very, very high level. And in doing so, we have to be on guard against the next strategy that they have up their sleeve. And if I may, it flashed on me, going back again to the Kennedy assassination, since George is down there with the team of researchers, Team W. What did the alphabet agency people and the script writers come up with when the American public began to waken up to the fact that not only was their martyred president taken from them, but that elements of what is now called deep state might well have been complicit in that action. Well, they started killing innocent people. I came across this book. This is about Richard Speck, which was then the crime of the century, where he killed 8 student nurses. And it took the air all away from all investigation or skepticism around the Kennedy assassination. And around this time, you had any number of spectacular, shortly around that time, you had the Texas Tower shootings with Charles Whitman, right? And now, from my understanding of these spree killers and serial killers, my understanding of this, because I wrote an essay years ago about it, my understanding today is that most of them, these are synthetic events as well, in order to take attention away from public skepticism about a certain set of issues. So, in order to survive into the next phase, I think the American public needs to be on guard for similar types of Operation Chaos type staged events.
I'll just jump in since there's a bit of a delay here on the audio and say, I was just reminding myself about the beginning of World War II. George is talking.
Do you think these throws, if you will, excuse me, I think I'm live now. I do think these throws are getting more and more obvious to read. I think this January 6th thing is just this fumbling and bumbling that they're trying to do to take the attention away from, the fact that people care about elections. And when they see great wrongs, they come to Washington to see how their senator is going to vote. And then all of a sudden we get this psyop that's thrown in, right? And we're seeing it right now. And everyone is seeing this FBI falling all over themselves to try to find somebody who isn't actually an informant. And so they start with 400 and they realize there's only like 6 guys that aren't FBI informants. So now what's happened is Christopher Wray has widened out the net to 2,000 people. So now it's going to be people who didn't go inside the Capitol, but maybe went up to the Capitol steps because they had heard somebody had been shot and killed, which I was one of them, right? And I think this is very indicative of, if they don't win, if they don't get the attention they want, they just do something more. They up the level of drama in some other kind of false flag. But like I said earlier, I think it was with Addie or Andy, think about Gulf of Tonkin. Think about 2 wacky torpedoes going at Jim Morrison of, Jim Morrison fame, of Doors fame, his father working for Naval Intelligence, working right over at Dahlgren, right across the river from us. That was 13 years of war, right? Is that capital op going to bring us another 13 years of war, low intensity war against the American people? And this is where I say, if we can read the tea leaves, if we can call these things out for the American people, we stop the op. We stop the op. Not stop the steal necessarily, but we stop the op.
Yeah.
I just want to throw this in because I think it's salient. Germany on September 3rd, 1939, claimed that it had been attacked by Poland. What really happened was they dressed up some SS guys in Polish border guard units, sent them across the border, had them fire their guns at the German side, and then the Germans defeated them. That was a complete false flag. That led to 9 years of war, 7 years of war. When we see these false flags, George, you're absolutely right to say, look out, because this could be another one of those false flags that they will use, especially when they have control of the media. That's Goebbels, control the media, and they've got control of it right now. The 1% of us maybe that see the truth behind it, there's not enough of us, and they know it.
Well, here's something to consider. We're thinking along traditional kinetic examples of false flags. And by the way, in the Asian theater, the Marco Polo Bridge set off the Sino-Japanese War. That was also a false flag. So it's very similar to the. It's used commonly right across the different powers. But we're thinking in terms of these false flags in kinetic terms. I'm thinking we might be fighting like generals the last war. I think the next false flag is probably going to be done on a psychic level or a truly neurological warfare. That's why there's been so much money and emphasis placed on neurological research, right? The brain research, the brain initiative. And I think the popular culture phenomenon of the so-called Mandela effect has been put in play to kind of prepare us to huge cognitive dissonance, which just takes place in our minds. So all the bridges and the roads and the infrastructure and the seaports will remain intact so that the bankers can just move in there and assume them. But if there's something like a neuronal attack on because there's a lot of research on transcranial stimulation. George, I think you even interviewed a guy in South Korea who works for such an entity, and they're Elon Musk has a contract at UC Davis doing these implants with simian experimental tests. So we know that there's money pouring in there. I suspect it's going to be something along the lines of it's just sort of a psychic, for lack of a better expression, sort of a psychic attack, the so-called Mandela effect operationalized. That's just a guess. Do you know what the Mandela effect is?
George,
well, I want to jump in there.
Okay. Maybe I should define what the
Go ahead,
Mandela
Doctor.
effect is. The Mandela effect, it's named after Nelson Mandela. It's an homage to him, so probably backhanded. I think there's a lot of Twilight language taunting going on there because he's the representative of peace, supposedly, right? But what they do is play with certain biographical elements, and then one group remembers in such a fashion, another group remembers it in a different fashion. So they're testing memory and recall, but also the creation of false memories, because there's been a lot of research with these abductions and sexual trauma of not just adults but children, and the sort of the false memory syndrome. It's a huge area of research in the behavioral science, and you combine that with neuroscience, and you combine that with the fact that people are now alert to any sort of kinetic actions. This might be the new type of false flag that might be launched against not just the American public, but the global population. And now they have their satellites up there. They got the 5G. We're all linked together in this network, this EMF network, where a psychic Mandela effect might be able to be imposed, right?
Forewarned is forearmed. I appreciate the warning, and I intend to keep my marbles all lined up in the right order. I'm not going to succumb to that stuff. I am aware. I'm glad that you mentioned it, because there is a part of what they're trying to do is not just to dumb us down, but to give us the sense that we only exist in the present, and that the past is just a dim memory, and the future is an unknown. So that here we are in the present, and that fixes us in their world. They can say, okay, now here we can manipulate this person, because he doesn't. Not only does he not know where he's coming from, he doesn't know where he's going. So that turns us all into very malleable personalities that can be shaped and used as they will. That's part of the whole big psyop of dumbing us down. And we have to insist on maintaining our intellects, our reason, our ability to figure things out. It's crucial to be an American. It's crucial to be a human. And, that's what's under attack. I agree with you, Professor.
And I would state that there's a lot of predictive programming, as it's been called, coming out of Hollywood. And I will cite the Truman
I
Show.
want to try to make a last statement. I'm sorry there's a delay, but
Okay.
Lena Pooh, who you know well, she talked about 5G, and she talked about that's conspiracy theory. Supposedly the SARS values of these phones. You're getting all excited about nothing. But if you switch a phone from continuous energy to pulse frequencies at a certain frequency with these 5G chips, it takes cells and micronucleates. It actually causes a sharding inside the cell. And this is the prion diseases of mad cow and Jakob Crutchfield and all these different prion diseases. So there is something to this, and we have to be sure that this is the people who brought us 9/11. This is people who are bringing us the bio 9/11 act right now. And hey, I looked at the papers. If you look at SARS value of phones, micronucleation of cells, it's a paper that came out in 2017 in a scientific journal.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm not saying that 5G is bad. I'm just saying let's consider these things and why they're putting them in and why they're so hell-bent on these things. That everyone has to get out of the school so we can put 5G in the school. Everybody has to get out of the hospitals so we can 5G the hospital. Everybody has to evacuate here. All these things. It just seems like a very kind of, I don't know, the only thing I could compare it to is the Holocaust, this kind of gradual boiling frog kind of thing. And I just think it's worth us talking about it, because just by us talking about it disrupts their plans.
Absolutely. And George, what they're, according to Lena, and John, this might be a good opportunity to have Lena back on the show, because she's doing some really good cutting edge research on this. But what I'm getting from her is what they're attacking is blood. It's the blood, this micronucleation that you're talking about, George, that will vibrate from these pulses. And that's what they're all about. They're about blood sacrifice. Are they not? And isn't this part of the well, I'm not going to mention the designation, but we all know what it is. But the pharmaceutical intervention, let's call it. What is it attacking? Yeah, it's attacking the blood.
And that is what Mark Kugelak has been on top of, and that ties everything together pretty well from last night when I was reading Operation Paperclip and concentrating on Kurt Bloma and Eric Traub. And Mark has a great show on Eric Traub, his most recent 2 shows, and that really can scare the bejesus out of you when you think about Prions disease. And as I've shared before, I have a brother-in-law who died from the Creutzfeldt Jacobs prion disease, and it's not pretty. So it's something that if they are doing that to us, then we've got to diffuse it somehow. We've got to get the right questions to the right people and force them to answer. What the heck is this about? And Mark is the guy. He's been on top of it. So, we're at the end of the hour, but George, please go right ahead. George, anything else from you? Let's I don't think George can hear me. Darrell, how about yourself? Would you like to have the last word tonight?
Yes. So
I just want to say thank you.
Please.
Sorry, I'm on a little delay, so I just want to say thanks.
All right. Thank you, George Webb. Thanks, Team W, and Godspeed down in New Orleans.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen.
To Miss New Orleans. All right, Darrell, and thanks, guys, once again for a Thursday night trio. Earl King
out of New Orleans, R&B. Come on, you got me flapping like a flag on a pole. Come on, baby, let the good times roll.
Okay.
All right. Peace out.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
All right. The Ospreys will send you, and we'll see the Ospreys in about 2 weeks here on Mystery Island.